Let's get Alan the expedition lifeboat back on the wet stuff. First though, I'm on strict instructions to subject all of you loyal viewers to some very important internal upgrades. You'll remember this fuel storage zone with lots of extra ballast living beneath it. Last year I was using one of these 400 litre, 100 gallon range extension bladders that are usually designed to be strapped down onto a deck outside. Don't get me wrong, they are excellently made and fold up very neatly when empty, but I found them to be very sloshy and unstable when not either full up or empty. Just unwieldy. So they are gone, and I'm prepping the area for some new fuel tanks, solid ones. But we'll be left with that tantalising thought for a moment longer, the sort of cliffhanger that sparked Peter and Martin to become long-term Channel Wonderment members. I also needed to check through the engine bay, but I've covered the front seal change and the oil change. I'm still not happy with the soundproofing, and that's nothing to do with the mass-loaded vinyl I've been using, but rather the tricky installation where I need to bridge and plug lots of gaps and edges. Due to the time pressures over this winter, this improvement work has constantly been pushed down the priority list. Low-frequency rumbling sound is very escapey, and it takes the smallest opportunity to break free of the engine bay and assault our ears. I've been chasing a very slow coolant leak, but that's no particular drama, and before reinstalling the cowling, I degrease and clean up the remnants of that spraying oil caused by the perished front engine seal. I have some more world-changing news for you, and this one is involving depth sounding. And you'll probably remember that a few episodes ago, in fact it was the one where I used AI for half of it, and some of you noticed, some of you didn't. I was testing a little mobile mini depth sounder which I thought could be of some use. But I have now decided that I'm just going to go whole hog and get a proper built-in one. And so that is what I have here. I've gone with what just fell out? Hopefully nothing important. I went with a company called NASA, which is not the NASA you're thinking of, who seem to make a lot of these standalone depth finding things. So here is mine, and it's not quite the basic model, it's a couple of levels up, but not one of their super sexy ones. And there's the front cover, and yeah, it's quite straightforward. You've got a couple of control buttons and an alarm. The actual alarm itself is down here. And I was thinking of places to put it. Now, the actual display itself I'm going to actually use on front of one of these junction boxes here, because at the moment that junction box isn't doing anything apart from exchanging one bit of electricity for another, and it's not actually giving me any information, so I can use that as a new visual panel, so that's quite neat. But then the actual positioning of the transponder being here, this thing, I'm not going to go through hull. I'm going to bond it onto the hull, which apparently for fiberglass boats is fine if you use a good quality epoxy and make sure there are no bubbles in the epoxy. So that one's going to go against the hull itself. And I'd identified a really nice spot down there near the battery storage area where there is a good flat bit of fiberglass hull. You can't really get to the bottom of Alan's hull in many places because I've either insulated it or there's a keel beneath it. But it's a bit close to the alternator, and I have it on reasonable authority, and by that I mean frantic complaining amongst lots and lots of online forum people, that if you have it close to an area of, a source of electronic interference, then it just ruins the results. I guess I could do a test there. It says in the instructions that you can use a bit of chewing gum to do a test to see how it works, but I'd rather just do it properly somewhere else. So I'm going to try and find somewhere up towards the bow, and I guess it's better that it's towards the bow anyway, an area of hull where I can bond this on. Luckily this cable was a nice long one, so I can run it all the way along up and to where the control panel is. So that's my next electrics job. There are a few units to choose from in NASA's budget standalone range, and I went with the newest model in one of the entry-level ranges, the Target 2. The manufacturers have thought ahead and realised it's going to be tricky to work out where to drill the holes in the mount or dash to attach the display to, as the corners don't have through holes, but rather blind, pre-positioned and fixed brass threaded rods sticking out, with wing nuts. So part of the box is a pre-hole template that you can use to mark up your plastic, fiberglass, metal or whatever it's to be fixed on. This is the standard transducer wired up to a fixed length of coax, and I gather they are compatible with most of NASA's range of depth sounders. If you damage it, you can replace it. And so I've run the cable all the way along underneath the racking to a position on the fiberglass hull where I was able to basically find a little burrow through past a load of metal, a load of ballast, a load of concrete and lead and all sorts of different things, and I managed to actually find the hull, and I was able to then bed it in quite neatly there. I was then able to pack in protection around the solidly bonded transducer and leave it to do its ping 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 work. Meanwhile, I found it was sunny outside, which stumped me rather, so I immediately wore shorts, but Wonderment channel members, the three great R's, Roy, Ray and Rory, would just tell me to shut up about the weather commentary and to get out the angle grinder. I complied, as I hold the views of the three R's in very high regard. I actually removed the equivalent old steel collar and pin from the stern years ago, but have been putting off this bow end wanton act of violence until now. It serves no purpose, might act as a ramming weapon against another boat, and I can instead use the shortened stump of steel as a potential future way to tie on a bow fender. Anyhow, I do hope that has entertained some people. Next, I'm wrenching out the original centrally located T-bollard at the stern. Imagine your collective relief to hear that I did remove the nuts and washers from the other side first. The reason is because it's in the way of this new excitement, and the bollard really needs to be on the starboard side of the deck. This was installed in Norway by Normar, and only needs a quick clean-up after its 17 years of hitherto low-stress service. This old mess just needs filling and repainting, but I'm not ready for the epoxy yet, as there's a load of old silicone sealant in the holes and around the edge. You can't bond anything to silicone, so I scrape out, drill, and then neaten with a countersink so that we don't end up with disobedient leaks. This is the new portside one I put in last year. Here's the newly open middle bit, and there's a spurious 4kg weight disc over there where I'll move the old bollard to, and underneath where I have to be careful to drill into accurately when I come in from above. I did forget to film the install itself, but you can make do with this clip of the cleaned up bollard and bolts. Just in time for... You could just see there that the offshore rated life raft is stowed in the most space-conscious manner practical, and I did that just before one massive downpour. I still had key tasks to finish outside the boat, and a short break in the rain was forecast for about 5 AM on launch day. Naturally, and those who know me well will know how much pleasure I derive from early starts, I was up at 4:45 to get those jobs done. Then more of the obvious returned. That said, I don't want to go out on this part of the Scottish Lothian coastline just whinging about the rain, so let's remind ourselves of what it is capable of when behaving itself. That, and I couldn't find another spot to use this clip in. And another profound observation. Well, Scotland takes away with many, many, many hands when it comes to the weather over the last few months, but it does give back with one, and that means that as we get towards, well, it's now May and obviously June, we do get long days, and so I'm able to work outside until well after 10. I think it's about 10 at night right now. So I'll probably be able to do another half an hour of work outside before it gets too dark to do it without using floodlights. And then I'll do another hour or so inside. We've got to get this done. Anyhow, after a 10-day launch delay caused by all those backlogged outside tasks, and I have to be honest, one day when I got nearest to date to just downing tools, chucking in a match and walking away without a glance back, my commitment to Alan returned, even if the forecast was on the comical side of rubbish.
Well done, BBC. 0% chance of rain, eh?
However, it turned to drizzle, which I'll call a victory. Alan, by the way, had no fuel. The rain's coming in about an hour or so, so I thought I'd try and get this done before we all get drenched. So, we've gone for a carefully tessellated set of 5 polyethylene tanks, rather like Alan's 100-litre day tank, and a thank you to the team at Tech Tanks for helping me source those and arranging collection. There are 3 benefits. The square shapes make maximum use of the racking space spare for diesel. Second, no need for baffles to avoid sloshing as each tank is self-contained. Third, depending on where fuel needs to be sourced from in future harbours and so on, each can be removed if need be and can just about be lifted when full. Americans amongst you, we pay nearly $7 per gallon, even for tax-rebated fuel for boats, so you may now know why I even bothered to set up the Buy Alan a Drink campaign. It was a little quicker in practice to keep 2 of the tanks in the boat and shuttle over 2 loads from the marina's pump, and I have a small but sprightly submerged transfer pump for ad hoc movements. So we're all fueled up with a little short of 300 litres, and in fact Wonderment members Nathan and Ellen are responsible for that one being filled up. That one, not that one. Cheers to you both. Launch day, early afternoon as the tide rises. It is Thursday, the 23rd of May, and there is a rising northerly breeze. The heavy rain is somehow somewhere else right now, but we'll get on the water in a few hours. The yard team have been really kind and brought us forward slightly, so we'll be slightly less pressed for time. Ahoy! There are 2 pairs of feet striding across this pontoon. Time for an introduction. Good afternoon. This is sunny Scotland, and this is Murray.
Hello.
We're crew for the next, well, probably not crew, you're more experienced than I am, so I'm going to be Murray's crew for the next few days. First job is to get the boat over to Edinburgh itself, to Granton, and then a few days later, once I've actually gone down to London and done some work, we are going to head on north, which is very exciting. And yeah, Murray's very, very kindly been very flexible over the last few weeks because basically I didn't finish the job on time, and so we had to delay.
Well, it's worth it.
Well, the thing is, back then it was really sunny, and we wouldn't want to start when it's nice weather, would we? So.
No.
We were the only launch that day, but they needed about 4 metres of water on the slipway, so you can't just pick a random time. We have fairly large tidal ranges here in the UK. We put lift marks on Alan's sides back in the old days, so it makes the job a little easier for the yard staff, given that Alan's hull shape is a little odd. Of course, little patches where the boat stands and wooden support blocks were will remain un-anti-fouled. This is okay, we can carry a handful of friendly barnacles, and it would have cost hundreds to lift Alan a week before for a whole day in order to paint those patches and then put Alan back again. The boat park was looking rather emptier than during the busy but not cramped days of midwinter when many people keep their boats ashore. It's strange seeing Alan slowly making his way, swaying lightly in the straps, along the road towards the sea. Back in September when we arrived, the 7 months or so before relaunching seemed like an age. Endless time to repair, add and improve. I've been dissatisfied with what's been accomplished, but move on we must. More miles must pass beneath Alan's impatient keel. I'm not entirely sure why we went in stern first, but I'm able to occasionally handle Alan, especially when powering astern, without crashing into everything in the vicinity, so I didn't panic. This pause, however, was odd, and I was keen to let Andrew and team cast us off and get on with their day, so didn't waste time setting up the camera inside to show us fighting Alan's engine. I tested it 3 times that day, but the starter motor just wouldn't quite turn it over enough to get it to fire up. We grabbed jump leads and connected one of the 12-volt house batteries. Far from instantly, it did at least start at that point. I'm confused, as the small starter battery had plenty of charge and has never struggled before. It wasn't particularly cold, and all the maintenance we'd done was an oil change, filter change, and the front seal swap. Any ideas? We're just going to head back onto the pontoon to pick up Alan from the third, who is waiting for us by the fuel dock, and that will work out quite nicely. We went out for a bit of a play to get a feel for how Alan's behaving. Alan was otherwise behaving just as he always has, and we collected Alanson the third from the pontoon. This was our target for the day, Granton Harbour, which is in practice Edinburgh's only harbour that can be considered within the city itself whilst open to pleasure boats and visitors. The 2 yacht clubs that share and govern the East Harbour were a pleasure to deal with. Most of the resident boats have a swing mooring allotted to them, and most of the harbour, except the pontoon area which is where visitors go, does dry out at low tide. There are some pilot boats and fishing boats that are also based from here, and it's a short drive from the city centre. There's also an excellent yet bewildering Polish grocery shop right next to the harbour. This, people of the channel, will be the final time I inflict these rather wonderful bridges on you as we pass beneath them. This small island is Inchgarvey, and it provides support for one of the historic bridge foundations just off the northwest shore. You'll notice these thingies on Alan's side. I won't spoil this seamless, flowing narrative by showing you how they came to be, so rest assured the full story will get a separate episode. The day's trip was only 6 or 7 nautical miles east, and it turns out such a short distance is not very well represented on my smart animated map software, so that wasn't very helpful, but I hope this is more so. Here's where we splashed at Port Edgar. Here's Granton over here. For those unfamiliar, this is the city of Edinburgh. The visibility and conditions weren't exactly fun, but the wind was gentle-ish and from the north, so the waves had no chance to build, whether short or choppy or a long swell.
It actually looks closer than it actually is though.
Yeah.
If you look at the chart, you can see we're actually still a fair bit to go.
Yeah. Before we knew it, Granton. Well, there's a few boats. I'd pre-booked and paid, but space on the pontoon is first come first served, and I'm still a little on edge when berthing Alan. Turned out it was rather easy, and we flipped Alan around on his lines from on the pontoon, so it would be an easy exit in a few days' time. Now that is neat and tidy.
Not so much.
There's the Royal Navy in us.
Not anymore.
Murray is ex-Navy, hence the plaudit masquerading as a jibe, and I tweaked the fenders so we were safe for the stay at the harbour, during which we expected some wind and a swell through the harbour entrance. And then I let the weather gods get all that angst and drama out of their system. That said, when rained on, Alan looks kind of extra smart, like he's had a wax polish, at least temporarily. Alanson III, who will hereafter be known as Alanson, was still with us, fortunately. Rest the soul of Alanson I, by the way. There was also some activity in the harbour. It was a bank holiday weekend, and that mostly comprised the yacht clubman with the small tender ferrying people to and from their moored boats. The pontoon wasn't overly full, and we were lucky to not have to reverse back down the other side, and a rather speedy-looking new neighbour arrived. Parking that must be a pain in the... Alan! Alan also looks quite diminutive next to some other boats. I wonder if I should have insisted on a 12-metre lifeboat. Now the tide was back in and the pontoons were floating high, I also thought it time to double-check the depth sounder was working and wasn't being obtuse with trapped air bubbles. That's spot on, so we're in business. Alan wasn't going anywhere, and my flight back down south was delayed by nearly 2 hours, so I wandered a little around Granton. Nice cottages, the harbour from the east. Behind me you can see further forth, and wow, it's like a mill pond. Any light winds from earlier have died away. So I'm hoping that this will maintain for tomorrow, but sort of without the rain, because it's been incessant today. There's another tiny harbour a half-hour's walk away, but it's for little boats and totally dries out. I walked back after getting some supper, and thoughts could shift to the plan ahead. Northward. This would be the final leg where we follow mainland Britain's coast. Finally, the inclement weather seemed to be lifting a little at least. We do want to remember this corner of Scotland at its best. This will be our route out of the harbour into the Forth in the next step, and once cast off, up and over there in the distance is the island of Inchkeith, a waypoint for us, and beyond that the northern shores of this huge inlet and then the North Sea once again. Stick around for that, and if you possibly can, support me and the reprobate that is Alan. The months ahead will be expensive. Cheers. Bye.